So, Deanna Reed is not your typical marketer. She is a strategic powerhouse who blends AI, neuromarketing, and B2I marketing. We're going to cover what that is to connect with audiences on a much deeper level than most of us can. Her story is about pushing boundaries, learning new skills, and importantly, directly connecting with experts to stay ahead of the curve. She's a marketing expert, she's a dynamic storyteller, and somebody who is very, very well placed to talk to us about this concept of B to I, business, I guess we could say, to individual. So, welcome to the podcast, Deanna.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, should we define, before we kind of get into the detail, and I know we're going to go deep on this conversation because it's something I think close to both of our hearts, but should we define what we mean by B to I, business to individual?
Sure. So typically you have, there's in the past always been kind of two breakdowns. You have business to consumer or business to business. And marketing content was generated based upon who your audience was. If you're talking to another business, you're going to talk about the business benefits of what you're providing. If you're talking to a consumer, you're going to talk about how it's going to affect their life. But when you really break everything down, you're one human talking to another human. And we all have specific individual needs and wants. And so B2I is kind of removing all the fluff of, okay, are they a consumer? Are they a business? And it's you speaking to that person individually. It's personalizing the content that you're sending to them based upon their needs and their wants, and really focusing on how to better communicate with them as a person.
And I guess if somebody's listening to this from what might have been originally termed B2B, so business to business, they'll be very familiar, I'm sure, with the concept of ABM, account-based marketing, where it's almost by definition you have to think of all of your customers within a customer, if you see what I mean. So, it might be the finance director, it could be the CEO, it could be the sales director. So they'll kind of be understanding that there are these little nuances as they talk to these individuals because they have a different perspective on life. I guess that's what kind of underpins B2I, isn't it?
Very much so. So, oh my goodness, there we are. Sorry about that. So very much so when you're speaking to a business, you can really get kind of clouded up in just talking to a business. Oh, this is the ROI that you'll see on this. But based upon that person's specific title, they're going to have different things that they're looking for. As a marketer, I'm looking for obviously ROI, but I'm looking at what leads is this going to generate me? How easy is this for me to implement? What's my team size? How much am I going to have to dedicate a person to utilizing this? A CEO is probably going to look at it a little bit differently. He's going to look at cost. He's going to look at ROI. And so it's really kind of taking what I think about when I think of B2I is when HubSpot, you have where you kind of create the business level, and then you have all of your contacts in there. And I can remember in each contact, like you put in like little notes that you've discovered about them, like, oh, their anniversary is this, oh, they like this. And that's where the B2I comes into. You're not talking to XYZ company. You're talking to this person at this level and addressing those specific needs and wants.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about this, because I'm sure nobody's out there thinking, I don't want to be doing that. I just want to talk generically to everybody. I'm sure most people, I would say probably 99% of marketers especially, will be over that. I mean, that was kind of old school, kind of,
Right.
blanket coverage now. But there's something really kind of quite fundamental here, isn't there, in terms of it's actually quite exciting because if you treat this potential customer, so it could be a prospect or let's say it's an existing customer, but if you go down this B2I route, there's something really nice at a human to human level of connecting beyond the product or service, isn't there? Because you're actually going to be talking, much as we are here in this podcast, kind of talking at a human level where you want to get to know the person. Even if you're quite introverted like I am, there's this fascination really with the other human, isn't there?
It becomes genuine. It's no longer sales speak, it's actual conversation. You're interested in what I have to say. I'm interested in what you have to say. There's probably underlining sales in there, but it's not so in your face, I'm being sold to. It's a conversation. And that's what people are really craving. We're getting more and more behind our screens, more and more out of stores. So many people are buying online. We're losing that human connection in transactions. And so we crave it, we look for it. And when you are received with it, it's a very rewarding experience. And that's why your audience will respond so much better to B2I, because you're really giving them that face to face, that genuine connection that they're missing from just a digital transaction.
I've always sort of been really quite curious about how within brand, if we take a few sort of steps back and say, a broader brand, where people fit in. I mean, obviously, if you think of, the obvious brands, people like Apple, say, for example, where you go into an Apple store and no matter where you are in the world, any city in the world, obviously there's a consistency of product. The promotion is likely to be a little bit customized for the locality. But the style and the kind of the human connection that you have when you're greeted by the Apple staff, they're very consistent, aren't they? There's a certain Apple type of employee who's going to greet you and take you through that kind of experience. So is consistency here, no matter where you are, whether you're marketing or sales, is consistency super important in terms of this projection of brand beyond the kind of one-to-one human interaction?
Oh, that's such a, as a marketer, like I could get in trouble saying no. It's really important. It's, you are building a brand, and so much effort as a marketer goes into establishing that brand, but you also have to have uniqueness. You can't feel like you're walking into a store full of clones. You've got to have, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy when you go to a store and you can see they let their employees have, I think of Office Space and with the flair, they have that little bit of touch of their personality. So, they're not like a clone. They're an individual person that you're speaking to, but they do still follow within the branding guidelines. And so you have that reassurance that you have that trust in that brand, you have that relationship with that brand, but you're also getting somebody that's an individual that you can really build that connection with. That's not going to just continue to spout whatever they've been told to spout to you. You're going to get their actual information, their interpretation.
I love this. This is really interesting. I'm just going to give you a little example, Deanna, just kind of to get your take on this, because my wife and I were in Scotland last week, and we were and I'm going to give this hotel a shout out because the level of service here, again human to human, was really, really interesting at a very high level. So it was the Gleneagles Townhouse Hotel, and we were in the restaurant of the hotel, and we were having dinner. So it was the first night of a couple of nights stay there, and the waitress, and again, this was a really interesting one because she was really cheeky. She had this real spark to her. She was on brand because she was quite consistent in terms of the offer and the service, but there was this real kind of almost naughtiness, but real playfulness with her. Just her personality was kind of shining through, to the point where my wife and I were taking a little selfie over the dinner, and it was like, oh, we need to kind of take this. And she photobombed us. She was at the back, holding a glass of like a glass of wine and stuff, and she photobombed it. It was so cheeky and playful. And so I guess my question with that as an example, and it was really fun and we loved it, but then we're kind of quite receptive to that. But is there a kind of a limit to how far you can take that? Because I guess some people would have maybe even taken offense at that. There's a sensitive kind of line here, isn't there, to draw? How do you work with that?
There is, I think it sounds to me like your waitress she understood those nuances. She understood who she was serving, and that was something that would be okay to do. I can't imagine in a role like that she would have been comfortable doing that with somebody who was less open to it. It sounds like there was plenty of exchange beforehand that made her feel that was something acceptable that she could do. But look what it did. I mean, you haven't forgotten her, and here you are a week later on your podcast talking about her and shouting out the hotel. I mean, amazing. Kudos to her. That's the kind of employee you want to have. Somebody who stays within your branding guidelines, but makes something a memorable experience, an experience that makes that connection that you're still thinking about it a week later. That's a marketer's dream. Like, I wish all of my employees could be like that.
And I wish I was like that too. I mean, this is the thing is it requires a real commitment, doesn't it? There's almost
Mhm.
that level, if we kind of still use her as the example, there's almost this level of listening. You talked about kind of the nuance in the interaction there. She had to be properly engaged, properly listening. I mean, she was serving multiple tables here. It wasn't just us. I mean, it wasn't a particularly busy night, but there was obviously just enough space for her to be able to interact with us so she could kind of get a sense of how far can I push this? What do they really need? So there was some proper active listening. That feels like that's part of this. Am I right?
I would definitely, 100%. Yeah. I think in all of marketing right now, you really can't get comfortable and lazy and just, I'm going to create this sequence of emails and just send it out broad based, and it'll work because it's always worked in the past. That's just not the way that it is anymore. There is a lot of listening. It's really paying attention to your audience, and that comes into, on the marketing side, all of the analytics that you have access to, all of the data that you have access to. And if you don't feel like you have enough access, you go out and you find more information. You survey your prospects. I personally just released a survey um, on my LinkedIn to all of my LinkedIn followers, just asking them their interpretation of a product or service that I'm marketing, and finding out more of what they think, because I know what they think once they come to my site, but what's leading them to my site? How much do they know before they get to my site? And so I've released a survey. There's other survey software out there, tools out there that can promote it even farther. But it's really making sure you do listen. Make sure you understand who you are interacting with. Because if you don't know, it's going to be so obvious that you don't know.
Trade-off here, though, isn't there? And the way you're describing this just kind of triggered a little thought in my mind that, okay, if I need to go into the analytics, I need to go deep into these analytics to kind of really understand those little nuances and that kind of need, I guess, in a particular customer. But there's a trade-off here because that's going to take me time. So there's a resource impact here, which means maybe then I haven't got time to go out and maybe do prospecting, or maybe my lead generation is going to need to kind of come back and draw back. So are we looking here to get, just by definition, more from what we've already got? In other words, the lifetime value of an existing customer becomes more important than trying to go out and find new customers, because this comes at a cost, doesn't it? Or maybe it's an investment, but there's time and energy required to do this.
Definitely. I think it boils down to, you're not casting as wide of a net anymore, but hopefully you're catching bigger fish. If you're really looking at your audience, if you're really honing in onto what they need and what they want, you're going to have better conversations with them. You're going to kind of weed out the ones that weren't going to be a good client, weren't going to be a good fit. You're going to weed those out sooner and be able to really focus on cultivating the relationships that are going to be the most beneficial to you. So there is a time investment. It is going to change, but it's changing for the better. You're going to have less upfront and better quality moving forward.
So am I kind of looking for patterns here then? So if I'm listening to this conversation and I'm a let's say B2C marketer, so business to consumer, where I've got a huge, potentially huge number of people who I'm actually interacting with. Maybe they're at the prospect stage, their consideration, or maybe they're existing customers. And if I've got this big number of people I'm after here, if I'm looking at my analytics and my social media insights and the emails that you talked about there that I've been sending out and stuff, am I looking for patterns? Because I guess what I'm looking for are, if I'm going to go down this B2I route, I'm looking ideally for similar kinds of people who are going to act and interact with me in similar ways. Because otherwise, I could be opening up this huge, great can of worms where every single interaction, every relationship is different. That's going to cost me so much in resource. It's going to really almost saturate me, isn't it? Whereas actually, if I can find patterns, then at least there's some, I guess, familiarity when I'm having those interactions. I kind of can then almost predict how this person's going to respond, much like that waitress. She's probably had customers like us before, and she knows just how far she can work with it. Is trends and patterns important in B2I?
Oh, 100%. 100%. How else are you going to know? We're all individuals. So if you're not looking at patterns and traits, it's going to be so much harder to pick up on what you need to do. And so for me, one of the things that I look at a lot, because we're focusing a lot on our website right now. So I'm looking at the heat maps. I'm looking at my customer journey through my website and figuring out what is interesting them. Where are they wanting to learn more? What are they wanting to know more about? Versus what have I put on there that's just fluff that they really don't care about? It gives me a lot of information as to how to improve my website, make it a better experience for them, but it also gives me insight that I can provide to my sales team. Hey, this seems to be the general thing that people are looking for. When they're going to be meeting with you, you should have answers for this information ready to go, because you know that they've already been on the site trying to find those answers. And if they haven't found them, they're going to be looking to you to provide them. So it very much so looking at patterns, looking at the habits. And a lot of times I want to say it screams out at you, because I feel like it does. Maybe other people have to look a little bit harder, but the information is there. And there's tools that can help you kind of sift through that as well. One of my favorite tools, HubSpot, and they're the ones I use the most. So those are the ones I think of the most, but they have an email tool where on the email, it'll tell you how long somebody actually read your email. Did they go all the way down? Did they stop in the middle? That's so important, because when you're sending an email to somebody, you're taking their time, you're asking for their space. You're kind of showing up unannounced. And so you want to be really careful with what you are sending them and how you're presenting that relationship and how you're presenting, like, respecting their time. And so I look at that quite frequently to see, are they appreciative of what I'm sending? Is it giving them value, or is it a waste of time to them? Is it going to just be deleted? They open it, glance, okay, I don't care about this, because that's going to have an impact on how they feel about my brand and how they feel about any future messaging. If I keep sending them stuff that they're not interested in, eventually they're going to stop reading it and they're going to stop receiving it. And so it's looking for those tools that are going to help you find the information that you need to be able to present what is going to really resonate with your audience.
I want to go a little bit deeper into one of the phrases that you use there, which will be familiar to a lot of the listeners and watchers of the podcast, which is customer journey. So you use that phrase, customer journey. And for those listening who are not familiar with it, basically it's the end-to-end journey that you take. Whether you like it or not, you take your customers on. So you can decide to choreograph it and map it and control it and guide it, or you can just leave it to the gods and anything can happen, but it's happening anyway. Basically, that's the reality. So there's an awareness stage, and you take them through that, hopefully then to the conversion stage, and then beyond into what we might call the retention stage, where you're building loyalty and, lifetime value. Do you see, Deanna, a difference at all with the whole B2I approach across any of those stages, or is it just one of the same? You can basically just consider B2I at any stage. It doesn't really matter. Do you see differences though?
It's a really good question. For me, every step of the process, I'm looking at it as a B2I. Even technically before they even come to me, I'm looking at B2I. I'm considering it just a bunch of individuals versus prospects and clients. And so when I'm looking at my customer journey, I'm looking at it as an individual, because nobody's going to take the same path. I would love for them to. It'd make my job so much easier, but we all get attracted to different things. Different things catch our eyes because we have different needs too. And so it's making sure that that journey is efficient and effective for each individual versus, okay, well, I really just want to capture these people. So this is the journey that I'm going to focus on and I'm going to create. And so, yeah, I hope that answers it. But I really, from the very, very beginning, it's looking at each person as an individual with different needs, different priorities, and then trying to accommodate that as much as possible.
So it's a fundamental approach. It's almost a mindset more than it is a process, then, isn't it? Because we're on. I think those of us who have done customer journey for many, many years, you kind of get into it. It's a bit of a system. The things you need to plug in. You've got channels. You've got content that overlays that, etc., etc. But this feels more like it's a mindset, and I'm kind of quite curious about that, because one of the things that we always used to do back in the day, old school marketing I'm talking about here, was we would build a customer persona, which might be
Mm-hmm.
a sort of an infographic. It might have some demographic information. You might even get a typical image, if you like, of that particular customer, so that you can really visualize them and then almost sort of understand their daily life, for example, and where they work and where they live and their kind of lifestyle, all those kinds of things. Does that still apply, or is that kind of too old school now to be relevant?
So what I've personally done, because I've been taught personas, and I think they're very helpful when you're starting to kind of build how are we going to curate our content? Like, what is our content going to be about? What are we going to talk about as pain points, and then the resolution to them? But I think they also become quite dangerous because you trap yourself into, well, these are my personas, these are who I'm talking to, and you miss opportunities. I think even the most educated marketer who really knows, there's going to be prospects out there that they haven't thought of, people who could use their service or their product that they haven't thought of. And when you really start getting that tunnel vision of, okay, well, this is who I'm speaking to, you're catering to that very, very narrow field. And everybody else is going to feel, I can't think of the word, but just you're going to know. Like, I've come to websites and looked and been kind of like, okay, I don't think I'm their target audience. It's not speaking to me. It's very technical, or there's a lot of companies that they love to try to wow you with their verbiage and show you how advanced and experienced they are. And I'm sitting there like with a dictionary on the other side, like, what does this word even mean? I don't even understand. And I think it's a trap that we kind of set for ourselves. We're trying to show this specific audience, oh, we know this, you can trust us. But then you're eliminating so much of your additional audience and isolating them. And they're just going to go somewhere else where they feel more welcome, where they feel more comfortable. And so I think personas are great to kind of get that start, but I personally don't rely on them for going much farther than that, because then that becomes the only person I'm speaking to, and I don't want that. I don't want to shut myself off to any other potential prospects.
It feels, again, there's this whole thing about proper listening, using the insights, really going deep, and treating them as individuals. I mean, I know it's B2I, so we're kind of saying that's what it is, but all I'm hearing is proof that that is the right way of doing it, rather than blanket, business to everyone or something like that. Actually, B2E, there's a new thing, business to everyone. Yeah, we don't really care. We're just going to send it out anyway. But there are still brands and companies who are doing that, and it
All the
feels now,
time.
the way you're describing it, they're really missing a trick, aren't they?
Well, I personally believe so. I received so many emails. I even get them in my LinkedIn, the messages, and I love it when they've like gone and looked at my profile and they've picked out just like one thing, and they're like, oh, I see that you like this. I like this too, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, I see you're trying. I think it's great that you're trying, but you're still missing the mark. I think you've kind of just done like this mass exodus of information, and you've pulled one point that you can talk to me about. And so I think that's kind of another really important part is B2I is, I believe, really vital, but it's not going to be efficient if you're not implementing it correctly. You can come across really creepy, or you can come across very disingenuous. And so there's, again, this nuance of knowing how to properly implement it, how to communicate with your audience without making them feel like they've been stalked, or making them feel like you gave the least amount of effort possible to try to make it feel personal. And
Mm.
I think there's a lot of companies that just aren't doing it well right now, but there are companies that are doing it really well. All you have to do is look at your email and look at your LinkedIn messages, the way that people communicate with you, and you're able to figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really does shout out, doesn't it? And it's interesting the way that you describe that, because I think certainly the ones that I've noticed, and I get that as well, is like, do you want to do this work? We're assuming you want to do this with your business. Well, sorry, you were wrong. That's not what I want to do with my
Right.
business. Well, you must want to do that with your business because, and you just think there's so many assumptions. This B2I is about not being assumptive, isn't it? If that is the word, but it's about not making assumptions and just jumping to a conclusion because, well, we've seen a pattern before, we've got the analytics and the insights, so you must fall into that pot because we've decided. It's about giving
Exactly.
people a chance to respond first, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely it's to me almost so disrespectful to make those assumptions. Um, but I also have to understand they're trying. At least they're trying. And so I try to be a little gentle in my responses and just be like, no, sorry, I think you read that wrong. um, but it's you've got to be just very gentle about what you're how you're communicating the information that you've found. And to be honest, another thing is you have to be really ethical about the information that you find. How did you find it? Um, I know there's still ways that you can go in and purchase people's emails and try to then just reach out to them and be like, oh, hey, remember me? We know that we didn't talk to you. We know we didn't give you your email or give you our email. And so I'm not going to have that really comfortable feeling with you right off that you're pretending that I have with you. And so it's also about implementation, making sure that what you're doing comes across very genuine, very smooth. Yeah.
So much in this, isn't there? I mean, the way that you've kind of been describing this, is there a balance between head and heart? I'll caveat this question in a bit more precise terms. But when I say is it about head, so it's about the thought, it's about logic, it's about almost hitting people with features and talking in a practical sense, or is it? And I guess there is a balance here, more about heart. So it's more about emotion, it's more about empathy, the intuition bit comes into play. It's how they're actually feeling about your brand or the conversation and how it develops. Is there almost like a perfect balance in B2I that you can say, right, it's this percentage thinking and head and mind, and it's this percentage kind of thought and emotions? Sorry, not thought, but heart and emotions. Is there a balance that we need to focus on?
There's definitely a balance. And I think I go back to kind of what got me into marketing is I really loved analytics, but I was also very creative. And I saw marketing as a way that you really get to blend those two. You get to really think in data and numbers and without the math, but you really get to think about what's motivating somebody to do this. And then you're looking at the creative side of how do I tell the story that does motivate them to do this. And it's taking that, which a lot of marketers are, that left brain and right brain, and you're just applying it in a different way now. You're applying it in a, okay, how do I connect with them in a way that it's genuine, that we feel like we've connected, they understand my motivation is personal first, it's relationship based first. If they don't want my product, that works, we're fine, all respect given, but not trying to sell to them. It's more of a pull sale formula than a push sale. And that does take a very good blending of heart versus brain. You really have to figure out how to craft your messaging correctly so that it's not overpowering on one end of it.
Yeah, again, it comes back to that point of being thoughtful and taking the time, doesn't it? Because for each and every encounter, be it directly face to face or through the phone contact or whatever, there is this kind of, I need to pause, I need to listen, I need to reflect, I need to then respond. So we're slowing everything down here, aren't we? Properly in so many different ways, with the data, with our approach, with our listening. Because have we got, and I guess this is a rhetorical question, but have we got too quick with marketing? Because it feels like it. Everybody's
Oh,
racing to scale and racing to grow. This is a sense check that says actually the quality of relationships will far outstrip the quality of just going super quick.
100%. We've had so many, I mean, technology has just rapidly innovated so many tools that marketers can use to just push information out there. But the problem with that is it becomes unintentional. You're not really thinking about the information that you're sending. You're just pushing information. You're flooding your audience with just visual and text, and just there's no real thought process on the actual connection with it. And it's because it's so easy to do. I've seen there's AI tools out there where it'll just generate like months worth of content for you based upon one prompt. Well, how can that be effective? Okay, great. They're going to see you. You'll probably get some people coming through just because they've seen you out there so much, but you're not going to have those genuine connections because it's only been one prompt. It's not thought that far deep into it to really make those connections, to really think about what their needs are. How am I going to meet those needs? How am I going to present my product so that they understand how this meets their needs and that it's beneficial to them? And so I do believe that, yeah, there's a lot of just products that have made it so easy to not do B2I marketing that the cash strapped or the personnel strapped marketing departments are like, oh, this is great. I can get all this out there. Look at the numbers that I can show of we're doing this many posts, we're doing this many pages or whatever. But it's not as effective. And maybe it works for some. It's just not the way that I would do it.
And I'm sure this is resonating, if people properly are honest with themselves and they sort of say, yeah, actually my last few encounters, yeah, I was pushing a bit hard here. Yeah, I was looking for the sale, but my line manager or my boss says, you got to do the numbers this month. I mean, there is a pressure here, isn't there, to almost go in the opposite direction. And I think one of the things I was just picking up there, I'd be very interested in your take on it, is this idea of creating space for the customer to respond and to reflect, because with this kind of bombarding with all this kind of, as you say, AI content at scale coming at you, there's no room to kind of pause for breath and think, what do I actually think about this? How do I want to respond? Much as you say with your kind of LinkedIn approaches, you have an opinion, you then respond, or you don't respond and you completely blank them and ignore them because they're spamming you. But there's kind of room to breathe as a customer, isn't there? Is that what we're trying to create here? Because it feels like there's a new kind of role for marketers here, not just to push stuff out in the conversation, but to permit and almost encourage space for the audience to then respond.
It's almost kind of going back to like the carrot on a stick. You give them a little bit and you let them think about it and you let them kind of digest over that. And you know what? I do want to know a little bit more about that. And you let them come back to you instead of just, oh, you liked that? Okay, here's 50 more images, 50 more content. I'm going to give you my white paper on this and my PDF guide on this. And to the point where it's information overload for them. And to be honest, for me, I'm currently dealing with it right now with a vendor that I had kind of reached out to. There was some interest. I realized it wasn't going to work out. And I've been getting bombarded with email after email after email, phone calls. It's been insane, to the point where I think, if this is what it is just to try to get my sale, what happens after you've got me? What does this relationship look like afterwards? It's really kind of turned me sour to that company. Obviously they don't respect my time because they're sending me a lot of information all at once. I haven't had time to even read the white paper that they sent me before I'm getting 3 more emails. Well, what did you think about that? Can we talk about it? Can we meet about it? And to be honest, in some ways, it really, we're human. And so to me, it almost reeks of desperation. And I sit there and think, okay, if you're trying so hard, what's wrong? If you're pushing your name to me so much, what is there that I'm missing that you think is not going to sell me? Of all the content that you've just provided me, why do you think that's not enough? And so it's really kind of starting to put yourself in that recipient's seat and thinking about how you feel when you get this information. Do you want 15 emails in 1 week from the same person? Or do you want the time to kind of like, this is interesting, I'm going to reach back out to them? And that doesn't mean that you don't ever follow up. It just means you're doing it in a much more respectful way, respectful of their time, and not coming across so domineering, just so I've got to get this sale. Um, it's being very respectful of their time, and it's that whole push versus pull marketing. You're trying to pull them towards you rather than just pushing out loads of information, whether they want it or not, whether they've asked for it or not. The audience is always going to respond much better to the pull marketing than they are to the push marketing. It's just our nature.
I've got a client. I'm really interested in your take on this one. So I've got a client who their key performance indicator, their KPI when it comes to digital marketing is, can we push out more content than the competition? There is a particular competitor, and I keep saying to them, hold on a minute, you're just falling into the trap of just push, 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 push. But they have a KPI of, we've got to be putting out more content because more content equals we are better than the competition. Okay, so this is a mindset that goes into this organization. What advice would you have for a marketer who is the marketer in this organization, who totally gets what we are talking about here, knows the value, can see it, they're well trained, they're experienced, but struggling to get this kind of momentum for change in the direction that we're talking about? Are there things that this marketer could do to convince the business, or how can the marketer convince the business it's okay not to chase the competition? It's okay not to have such a noisy digital footprint. What can they do?
So right away, like the first, I mean, I'm aghast. It's such a vanity metric. There's nothing about that translates to the customer experience. And so at this point, their KPI is all about us, us, us. What are we doing? How good are we? And I think that makes it a very difficult position for that marketer, especially if he knows that that's not beneficial, to be kind of put in that position. I've had that position before, not the exact same thing, but where I was asked for a KPI that was just so not the point. It's just so far, it's a vanity metric. And so what I personally did was I went back to our content and showed, okay, this is how long people are interacting with our content. We're getting to the point where we have less opens, we have less interactions, we have less engagement. We are giving too much. If need be, ask for a trial. Ask for 2 weeks that you can do it the way that you think is going to be better, and compare those metrics to what they're doing currently. I think one of the big issues, we get so stuck on staring down our competition. And I think about it like a bicycle race. If you're biking and your competition's there, if you're so focused on them, you're going to miss all the obstacles and all of the opportunities ahead. You're just going to be following behind them, and you lose your own voice. If you're chasing that competition and, well, the competition does it, so we need to do it too, well, then you become blended and blurred with that competition. And at that point, you've lost any differentiating factor. And you're fighting the competition for their clients who've already found them. It just becomes a no-win situation. And so it's great to kind of every now and then glance over, well, what are they doing? But if you're staring so much and trying to be just like them or be better than them, you've completely missed the whole point of marketing. You need to be marketing your business with your voice and really connecting to your audience. And that's not going to come from staring at the opposition consistently and trying to just copy everything that they do, or, oh, I'm going to one up them. You one up them by being innovative, by doing it a different way than what they're doing, and really differentiating yourself. And so the only advice that I could really give is to be able to kind of go back to that data and show why this method isn't working. Depending upon the CRM system he has, he could probably even show that whole customer journey. When we're bringing them from these mass communications, they're dropping off here at this point or whatever. If he can take that data to kind of at least justify a trial of doing it the way that he thinks is better, he's going to have better results on the other end. But at the same time, you have to establish what those results are going to be, because it sounds to me like management's results is just in quantity, and they're not considering quality. They're not considering the relationships that are going to be built around this. And so it's really kind of getting them to understand what is a valuable metric versus what is just a vanity metric. Because it doesn't matter how much content we have out there. If nobody's paying attention to it, if nobody cares about it anymore, because we've just made it where it just becomes part of the wallpaper of their profile and they're just scrolling right past it, then there's no point to it. But taking the time to really create something of value that's going to make them stop and make them read and then make them, hey, you know what? I want to know more about that. That's a much different metric. And that's really where you start to look at what your efficiency is and your effectiveness.
That's a great answer. I love it. That feels so practical and so achievable, really, doesn't it? And if he was to go and kind of do that, and I think just following this through as a little case study examples can be really useful and bring a lot of value to a lot of people, because I'm sure he's not alone. There'll be a lot of organizations doing this and falling into this trap. Is this a good way and a good space to be using AI? Because it would feel that most of us are using AI for content creation, but actually behind the scenes using AI to do that kind of evaluation of those kind of pilot studies, or sort of, as you say, 2-week tests, would be a great way of kind of assimilating the data to then report it back in a way that was nuanced for each of the individual members of the management team, for example. So the finance director gets their own little take on it. This is the best way of spending our time and money. The sales director gets an opportunity to say, okay, actually, this is going to deliver some better leads and prospects for me. And then, of course, managing director or chief exec sat there thinking, we've got much more control over the business now. This is better than the competition. So is AI a great kind of series of tools to be able to kind of support us in that?
Very much so. That's one of the key ways that I use AI. I will export all of my Google Ads information, all of my Google Analytics information, and I will import that into my AI, and then sit and work with that data in AI and have it answer questions for me, like what page seemed to grow the most in interest over the past month, what's the best performing, what has the longest time or the most interactions with it. And that's all information that this person could be pulling that data from social media, from their website, from GA4, and putting that into AI and having AI help them to kind of sort through it. Because if you're doing it just on your own, digging through, you're probably going to miss something because it's tedious. It's a lot. But using AI, that's one of the great things about AI, is it can sort through all of that information in a snap. And then the really important thing is to go back and ask it, are there any hallucinations? Is there any part of this that you didn't know the answer, and so you've imagined the answer or provided me the answer that you think is going to work? Because there's no point in using AI as a tool if you're going to then take incorrect information and present that. It's not going to be good for you. And so definitely, once you've run all of that, go back through AI, do your quality assurance checks, make sure, double check the information that it's got. You don't have to go through every single one of them, but just double check it, because that is one of the flaws with AI still, is that its sole purpose is to please you. And it doesn't always tell you, I don't have enough information, or, hey, I'm missing this piece. It'll just make an assumption based upon what it already knows. But when you're then presenting, you don't want to be presenting with an assumption. You want to be presenting with the evidence that you have. And so definitely use AI as that tool to really help you sift and sort through that data, but then just double check it to make sure that it's accurate before you present it.
I have a final question for you, Deanna. And this one's, I guess it's a huge question, and you might feel that, I don't know, it's kind of too big a question to answer. But I'm just interested in your take on this one. With AI, obviously, in its various guises, and we know it's not perfect, and you've eloquently described there where, it does have limitations potentially. We just got to be careful working kind of with it. Are you hopeful for marketing personalization and B2I into the future, where we become more and more reliant on the machine rather than the human? Are you still hopeful for how we personalize and keeping the human in marketing?
Oh, I'm definitely, I think I have my concerns with AI. I do love AI. It helps so much, but I see it as just a new way too of companies doing what they've been able to do with other tools and just mass produce and massive scale, just push out content. And so I feel that it makes it easier to lose that B2I. And I really, really hope that we don't, because it's been proven time after time we prefer to talk with humans. Think about all the times that you get the automated phone attendant, and I personally, I'm constantly just customer service, please, just a customer service rep, please, and you just go in these spirals. And the same thing with the chat bots when you go to get assistance, and it's, well, I don't understand that. Can you tell me again? We want human interaction, and AI has made it so easy to just produce content and just chunk by chunk. We don't want to lose that personalization, that human interaction. And so that's why I for everything AI, it's great to go ahead and have it help you create it, but then you've got to touch it afterwards. Anything that you do, you've got to touch it. You've got to put that human element back into it, because the technology is just not there right now to make it human. So yeah, I am hopeful that we continue the B2I even with AI, that we don't lose sight of that, because it's so valuable to really build those connections with your audience.
So I think it's almost come full circle here, that it's all about balance. It's balancing the relationship that you're having with your audience. It's balance in terms of the systems and the processes. It's balancing the customer journey. It's balancing head and heart. It's balancing here the human with the AI. It's just all about balance, isn't it? I think that's the ultimate kind of thing that is the takeaway, certainly for me here in this conversation. Deanna, I want to put people in contact and in touch with you if they want to carry on the conversation with you. How do they best connect with you?
Sure. The easiest way is my LinkedIn, which is my name, Deanna Reed 1. It's the best way to find me. Feel free to message me. Just don't do a static message, please. Let's do some BTI. Practice your BTI. But yeah, I love to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Brilliant. And a final tip then. So if somebody's looking to, say they're a marketer, looking to kind of get started in this whole personalization with their audience, what would the first step be? Final thought.
Well, the first step that I took is a lot of reading, a lot of research. There are some fantastic people out there that are far more knowledgeable about it than I am, that I learned from. One of the people that I followed quite a lot was Noz Urbina, Nozurbina. He does a lot of content on LinkedIn about it. Look for the people that are really the knowledge base on it, and learn from them. There's also LinkedIn learning videos about it. There's YouTube about it. And then just start practicing it. If you're not comfortable practicing it on a professional scale, it works personally too. Start it on just your personal communications with people. Try to be a little bit more genuine and connect with them more in all of your communication, and see the difference. Start practicing it there, and then you can integrate it into your professional communications. But there's a wealth of people out there that have a lot of knowledge on the subject.
So Deanna Reed, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.